Hi everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Accidental Expat Life. I'm Doug, and have you ever wondered whether teaching abroad is really worth it? Maybe you're a new teacher dreaming of seeing the world. Maybe you're an experienced educator looking for a fresh challenge. Or perhaps you're just wondering if moving overseas is even possible to do with a family. Well, after more than 2 decades teaching internationally in countries including South Korea, Thailand, Egypt, and Brazil, I've experienced both the incredible highs and the very real challenges of life overseas. In this video, I'm going to break down the biggest advantages and disadvantages of teaching abroad for both single teachers and teachers with families. We'll talk about travel, finances, career opportunities, raising children overseas, homesickness, culture shock, and the realities that many recruiters and many schools don't always tell you. By the end of this video, you'll have a much clearer idea of whether an international teaching career is the right move for you. So if you're ready, let's get started. There are many positives for a new teacher to teach abroad. The one thing, obviously, first and foremost, is that you're going to be getting great teaching experience. When I graduated from university in Vancouver, there were not a lot of full-time teaching positions available. The only thing that was available were substitute teaching, and they were in very remote parts of British Columbia, which I really had no interest in. So I didn't go into teaching right away and ended up getting different jobs prior to getting back into teaching. If you see my other videos, you'll see how it all started. But this is a big thing, is to get teaching experience for yourself instead of just being a substitute teacher while you're back in your home country. Another is you get to develop confidence and independence. You're moving to a brand new country, you've got to set up a house, you have to set up a phone, you've got to set up internet, you've got to set up all these different things, so you become very independent. And it really improves your confidence as you move on. Another is you are working with students from different cultures and different backgrounds. That I found extremely interesting because there were students from all over the world at some of the schools I've been at. So it was very, very interesting to find out about their countries and about their cultures. And it's one thing that I'll never forget. You also get to learn new teaching methods or teaching in different curricula. So as a Canadian, I was teaching in the British curriculum system for many of my jobs. And it just gives you a chance to teach in a different area as opposed to what you're used to teaching at home. Another big one is the chances you get to travel during the school holidays. You get to experience new countries, especially ones that are near to you, because if you have 2 weeks off or a week off, you can just jet off to different places. And that was one of the greatest experiences that I've had since I've been teaching abroad. Another big one is the opportunity to save money. A lot of schools provide housing, they provide a housing allowance, they provide flights either at the beginning or end of your contract or even during the summer months. And the big one is health insurance. So all of these definitely help you save money during your time that you're abroad. And another big one is you get the opportunity to make lifelong friendships with colleagues from around the world. I've got friends that I've met when I worked in Thailand, for example, from the UK, from America, from different parts of Canada, from Singapore. The list goes on, and that is one thing that I really, really enjoyed about teaching abroad. Like with everything, there are obviously negatives to when you are teaching abroad. I guess the first one that's very important is that you're far away from your family and your friends. And that can make things a little bit difficult at times, especially if you're really close to your family. You're missing birthdays, you're missing weddings, you're missing holidays and other important events. And it can be kind of sad at times. My first job in Korea, and then when I moved to Thailand, I was 12-hour difference from home. So it was really hard to get on the same page with people if you wanted to actually talk to them. So that was a little bit difficult. Then I went to Egypt, so that was 7 hours. So that was a little bit more bearable. And then finally to Brazil, which was on the same time zone. So that was a little bit easier. But that was definitely one of the toughest parts, was being away from family and friends. Another one is the culture shock and having to adjust to a different way of life. Every place you move to is very different than what you've grown up with. So, some things that were normal for me in Canada were totally different in one of the countries I was in, or vice versa. So that takes a little to get used to. Another one is the language barrier. When I lived in Korea, Korean language was a little bit easier, so I could learn a little bit of it. But then when I moved to Thailand, it was more difficult. And then when I moved to Egypt, Arabic was impossible for me, and I had absolutely no idea how to speak it at all. And then Brazilian Portuguese is not that bad, similar to Spanish, but a little bit easier to learn. Another one is just feeling lonely, especially for the first few months that you're there. If you've never really traveled away from home and you're there, you haven't met any new people yet, it can take a little toll on you for the first little while that you're just in your place by yourself. Another is the different expectations from the parents, the students, and the school leadership. It's a little bit different than teaching in your home country, so that takes a little bit to get used to. Another is the frequent moves that can make it difficult to put down roots. Now, some people stay in a country for 5, 10, 15 years. I stayed in Thailand for 10 years. I stayed in Egypt for 10 years. And then when it's time to leave, it is very, very difficult to pick up everything and move to a different country. Another negative is the visa and immigration paperwork. That can be stressful. Usually the schools will handle this for you, and you just have to give them the information and they'll go down to the office and they'll do everything. But I do remember my time going to Brazil. There was a lot of stuff that I had to do that was very, very frustrating, that I never had to deal with before. And it got to a point where I thought I wasn't going to be able to get the job because I didn't think I would be able to get this stuff done in time. Another negative is the healthcare in certain countries. Now, I was lucky. The countries that I was in, like I say, Thailand, Egypt, Brazil, the healthcare was excellent. Thailand, it felt like you were walking into a hotel when you went to a hospital. It was just amazing. And a lot of the doctors everywhere speak English, so you're able to talk to them and tell them what your problem is, and they're able to help you. Now, dating and relationships. If you're single, it can be a little bit of a difficult time. You can meet somebody, you can get really close to them, but then when you're moving to another country, they maybe can't move. So then you've got to break up, and that can be a little bit of a complicated situation when you get very close to somebody and then all of a sudden you just have to pick up and move to another country without that person. Another one is finding the right school, which can be quite challenging. Some schools are excellent, while other schools may not provide the support and the work environment that you expect. I was lucky. The majority of the schools that I worked at were great. The people that I worked with were great. The leadership was great, although there were times when things weren't going like you thought they could, and that became very frustrating within your job and made you think about staying or picking up and either moving to another school in that country or moving to another country altogether. And last one, I would say, and this is a big one, because especially if you're at a school for a long period of time, it's very emotional when you have to leave the students and the colleagues that you work with after building such strong relationships. I remember leaving Thailand. The students that I worked with, I was at the same school for the entire time. So I saw a bunch of students grow up from very small to secondary students, and it was very tough to leave them and move on. And I still keep in contact with some of them, which is great. So that's been a good part of it. I will tell you about my experience in Brazil. I was only there for a very short time, but the students that I worked with were unbelievable, and they threw me a surprise party when I was leaving, and I really missed them because they were probably, in all honesty, the best students that I've ever had the chance to work with in my teaching career. So those are the negatives, and you weigh them against the positives, and then you figure out whether it's something that you want to do or it's something that is not of interest to you. So here are a few positives for single teachers. As I mentioned earlier, the opportunity and the freedom to travel on weekends and on school holidays is an amazing opportunity. As a single teacher, you can just pick up and go wherever you want for a few days, a week, a month during the school breaks. So that's one of the big positives of working in some of these countries. It's also an opportunity to live in countries that you might never have considered. When I was living in Canada, not once did I ever think I would live in Thailand or Egypt or Brazil. So it's an opportunity to see different parts of the world while you are employed. Another chance to meet people from all over the world and build international network of friends. I had the opportunity to meet so many different people in all the places I worked. Being a golfer really, really helped because golf was so popular in both Thailand and in Egypt, and I met so many people through that. And I actually ended up getting a different job through a person who I met when I played golf in Thailand. That's how I ended up getting my job in Egypt, which I'll talk about on my other videos. It's an opportunity to save money, as I mentioned, especially when the housing and the flights and medical are included. Some schools offer other different perks as well, but that's the big one, is a lot of chance as a single teacher anyway. You get a chance to save more money than if you were with a family and if you had children to worry about. And it's a great opportunity to learn a new language and then immerse yourself in a different culture. A lot of schools will offer courses for learning the language of the country that you're in, so that will help a lot. As I said, Arabic was very, very difficult in Egypt for me. So thank goodness I had Google Translate that I used quite a bit. And that got me through a lot of different situations because without it, I would have been in big trouble. And it also gives you a chance to enjoy a sense of adventure and personal growth. You're out in places that, like I said, you've never ever dreamed of. And you do things that you'll probably never have the chance to do again unless you're in that place. Unless you're a real big world traveler who does these things. It can be quite expensive if you're doing it that way, but when you're working in these countries and they're so close by that it gives you a great sense of adventure and taking on new things in your life that you probably never would have thought of. There's quite a few positives for families. Probably the most important one, and I don't have any children, but I would know that usually your child will receive free or heavily discounted tuition at the school where you're working. Usually the first child is free, the second one gets a certain amount of a discount, the third another amount of a discount. So that's a big help for a lot of these families when they're teaching abroad. Also, your children get an opportunity to grow up in a multicultural environment, and they often become more globally minded. They learn about the culture that they're living in, and they're not only set in their ways of the country that they are from. They learn a bunch of different things, and I think it only helps them as they grow up, and it helps them when they become older. Another opportunity for the children is that they get a chance to learn another language. I was teaching in a couple of schools, and there were some students whose parents had moved around to different countries, and they could speak 3 to 4 different languages. And to me, that is just an amazing thing to be able to do. And I think that it really will help them when they become older. Also, families can travel together during the school holidays and experience different countries. I had new families that would go skiing. They would go to different places to go to the beach, going to other places where they would probably never have the opportunity to do it. So as a family, you get a chance to travel a lot. Another positive is, same with the single teacher, is housing, health insurance, annual flights. Usually the flights are for the parent, the teacher. Sometimes they include the kids, but not always. A lot of families that I knew, both the husband and wife were teaching at the school. So, a double salary. They were also had an opportunity to buy tickets for their children. So that stuff adds up when you don't have to pay for housing and flights and medical. And international schools also offer strong, supportive communities that help families to settle in. So as a new family moving to a school, you're going to become close friends with other families, and they're going to take you in, and they're going to show you everything. They're going to help you with whatever problems you have. And it really helps you settle into the environment that you've moved to. And the parents can also provide their children with a very unique education and life experience that few people have. When you're living in your home country, you don't get a chance to provide these things for your children. So I think this is a great opportunity to help your children grow, and it's a great chance for them to experience different cultures and different foods and different holidays and all these different things as they're growing up. And then finally, many families build lifelong friendships with the people from around the world. So you've got different families from different countries. You become very close friends with them, and your families hang out together, you do things, you travel together. So it's a great chance to meet other people and become involved with different people from different countries. Now, some of the negatives for single teachers, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, things like loneliness, especially for the first few months that you're in the country and you don't know anybody yet, being far from your family and your friends, dating, as I said, can be difficult, missing important family events back home, homesickness, especially during holidays, during Christmas. It was very tough sometimes to not be able to go back for Christmas, because that was always a great time when I was with my family. There's also a limited support system if you happen to become ill or face an emergency. Maybe you can't get that help that you need, and the nearest person is your family, who is thousands of miles away. So that can kind of weigh on you a little bit if you have a serious illness, or you have some kind of a medical emergency that requires immediate attention. Frequent moves can make it hard to build long-term relationships. I've worked with a number of teachers who would go to a school, and most contracts for a new teacher were 2 years. So they would just go to these schools for 2 years and then pick up and move someplace else for 2 years, and then pick up and move someplace else. So they weren't laying down any roots, and it was really kind of hard for them to build any long-term relationships when they were moving so often. And a big thing and an important thing is that contracts can end unexpectedly, which require another move. And these can happen for various reasons. Either maybe you didn't fulfill something in the contract. I teachers that had their contracts terminated for a certain behavior. And, those are issues that once that happens, some schools will even, once they cancel your contract, they will cancel your visa as well, and you have to leave the country within a certain amount of time. So those are things that can be very scary. If you happen to lose your contract and you have to leave immediately, if your contract isn't renewed for a school, then at least you have some time to find a new job, whether you want to stay in that country or whether you're looking in a different country. So at least that gives you some time. But when things like that happen immediately, it can be quite a shock, and it can really, really be a scary situation. The negatives for families, I think, really impacts the children. When they move to a new school, they may struggle to adjust to the new school, to the culture, or especially the language, which can be very difficult. I remember when I was in elementary school, just moving within my city and going to a new school, it was a tough situation to start in a new school. So I can't imagine for some of these children who maybe are a little bit on the shyer side, it's maybe difficult for them to make friends. So it makes it quite difficult for them to adjust to the new school, and then that affects their schoolwork. So it's kind of this leads to this kind of a thing where that can have an effect on them. Also, moving every few years can be difficult for the children, especially the teenagers. I think they make such close friends, and when you're older, you share different things, and when you move away from those friends, it becomes very difficult for them. I think for younger students, it's tough as well, but I think they're able to adjust a little bit easier. But I think for the older teenagers, I think this is a tough situation for them. As for the spouses, usually, for example, if the husband's working and the wife isn't, maybe it's difficult for her to find another job, or vice versa. The wife could be the teacher and the husband's looking for something else. But most of the families I came across were both the husband and wife were teaching. So it usually wasn't that big of a problem. I found that being apart, especially for families and the young kids, being away from grandparents and your extended family is very difficult. And you miss those times during holidays and special events. Another issue is if there's a family emergency, especially if you have to go back to your country for something, you not only are paying for yourself, but you're paying for an entire family, 3, 4, 5 people, which can be very expensive when you have to travel back. Another negative is leaving your close friends behind every time you move. And we mentioned this a little bit earlier, especially with the kids. They become so close to friends of theirs. They've grown up with them for maybe 3, 4 years, and they get used to them. And then all of a sudden they have to move, and it can be very traumatic for some kids. And the other thing is that international moves can be quite stressful and can be very expensive, especially for families. For individuals, it's not bad, but as a family, when you're moving a family of 4 or 5, the price adds up. And I know some schools will provide relocation support, so you get a little bit of money for that, but sometimes it doesn't always add up to pay for your expenses to ship a bunch of things from one country to another. So those expensive moves can really take a toll, and any of that money that maybe you have saved up while you've been working now ends up going towards another move to a different country. So I think those negatives really play into whether or not, as a family, it's a good idea to be teaching abroad or not. So in conclusion, teaching abroad is an incredible adventure, but it isn't always easy. Whether you're single or have a family, success depends on being flexible, open-minded, and willing to embrace change. For most international teachers, the rewards outweigh the challenges, but it's important to go in with realistic expectations. I will tell you honestly, my 25 years of working abroad has been absolutely incredible. I've been to places that I never thought I would ever get to in my life, and I've met some incredible people, obviously incredible students, and I've got a chance to experience some things that I will never ever forget. So if it was me and I was telling you, I would say if you have the opportunity to teach abroad, take that chance. You know, if you don't like it, you can always move back. But I find that so many people enjoy not only the schools that they work at, but the countries they're working in. And like I say, the positives definitely outweigh the negatives in my opinion. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned a little bit. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask and I will gladly answer them for you. But this has been a great time for me to explain how I feel about teaching abroad. So I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you soon.